morning, everybody. This past Sunday marked the start of National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Now, since 1981, here in Washington and in communities across the nation, people have observed this week with candlelight vigils, public rallies, to renew our commitment to crime victims and their families. I think it's important that we do this to recognize the needs of crime victims and their families. I was talking with Susan Russell and Judy Rex from our state of Vermont about this, and reminded, of course, it's the 25th anniversary, and it seems, in some ways, it seems like just yesterday that the Victims of Crime Act was passed. I was one of the supporters of that at the time. It's supporting essential services for crime victims and their families. And people in Vermont have heard me tell about how when I was a prosecutor, there weren't any of these programs, and we had to make them up as we went along. I remember my wife and I personally financing a number of the programs and a number of volunteers and others. And now we have grants for direct services to victims, state crime victim compensation programs, emergency shelters, crisis intervention, counseling, assistance in participating in the criminal justice system. All these, and I should note that these do not cost taxpayers any money. They're funded from a reserve fund created from the fines and penalties paid by federal criminal offenders. A lot of us have worked hard over the years to protect the Crime Victims Fund. They serve nearly 4 million crime victims each year, including victims of violent crime, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, drunk driving. This makes it possible. I think of the number of times we could congratulate ourselves we prosecuted somebody, and they go off, and we spend a fortune to prosecute the person. And at that time, there was nothing to do anything for the victims. I was worried that the Crime Victims Fund be there in good times and bad. And several years ago, I worked to make sure I had a rainy day capacity, so we wouldn't have to worry about it running out of money and being left stranded. And more recently, an annual cap has been set in the level of funding to be spent from the fund in a given year. I remember when the cap was established and former President Bush sought to empty the Crime Victims Fund of unexpended funds that we'd put in there to have for a rainy day. I joined a bipartisan effort with Senator Crapo of Idaho and others from both political parties to make sure that the money was preserved. There are enough other places we can find money. This is one that was being well used. So we're working as hard as ever. We're working with senators from both sides of the aisle. I hope we can raise the cap this coming year to devote more than $700 million to crime victims. And I want to commend Senator Mikulski, who's the chairwoman of the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Subcommittee, and Senator Shelby, the ranking member, for working with the president to provide $100 million in the Economic Recovery Program for crime victims. And I'll look forward working with Senator Mikulski and Senator Crapo, and of course, Senator Feinstein, who has been a tremendous help on all of this, to keep us going. So, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses. Two of our witnesses I mentioned come from Vermont. Susan Russell has a incredible story. Her courage and strength and inspiration to us all. And I should mention she lives just a few miles from where I live in Vermont. Judy Rex I've enjoyed it over the years calling Judy to say, Judy, you know that money that wasn't coming? It's coming. And knowing it's going to be done well, of course, Mary Lou Leahy, the National Center for Crimes of Victim, well known to this committee, is Steve Doreen from the National Association of VOCA Assistants, and R. Keith Perkins from the very well-named Never Again Foundation. Before we go to the witnesses, Senator Feinstein, did you want to say anything? Or?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I very much appreciate the good work you have done and these witnesses present. In 2004, Senator Kyle and I introduced and subsequently passed the Crime Victims' Rights Act, and that was essentially giving crime victims certain basic rights, the right to be present in the court, the right to know when your attacker has been released, the right to make a statement. But what we found was that defendants had essentially all of the rights, and a crime victim had virtually no rights. And I would just be curious at a later time if in the comments of your witnesses, if they would be willing to comment on how effective they believe this has been, and if they think there still is additional action to be taken. I mean, I was appalled when I learned that a victim, let's say a rape victim, had no right to be notified if her attacker is released from jail. And theoretically, at least by the law, now this is taken care of. So my question is, are these rights in fact being carried out? And perhaps if you can, you'd address that in your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Since 1998, Susan Russell has served as a criminal justice victim services consultant with the Office for Victims of Crime. For the past 7 years, she's worked for the Central Vermont Council on Aging as the Director of Community Service, Central Vermont's area where I'm from. She also chaired Vermont Sexual Violence Task Force, served as a member of the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. She's received several awards for her efforts, including the 2005 National Organization for Victim Assistance Edith Sergen Award for Outstanding Dedication and Leadership, and Vermont's 1995 Outstanding Victim Advocacy and Awareness Award. Ms. Russell, please go ahead.